Nyata, Rueben Berg here, elected member for the First People's Assembly of Victoria. And now that I have been elected by the Eastern Mar, I've started thinking more about what it is that my aspirations are for the next version of the Assembly and what it is that we could be aspiring to for a future form of the Assembly, for Assembly 3.0 as we talk about it. That's the body that will be able to negotiate, to have and able to create through the treaty process. And I thought it might be useful just for me to share some of my initial thoughts, and these are just my own personal thoughts. This is going to be an ongoing journey to progress these conversations that's going to involve some really important collaborations, some conversations with community. I'll be talking more broadly to community about this. I'll be talking directly to the Eastern Mar community about this, and we as a chamber will have to come together and have these discussions. But I think it's useful to have kind of a starting point, and this is where I'm coming from in terms of my current thinking, and would love to hear other people's thoughts and ideas around this. So when I think about what a future form of the Assembly could be, and the kind of powers it will hold, the functions it will undertake, to my mind there are four really important functions that we should be aspiring to. The first function is that the Assembly should be a decision-making body. It should be able to make decisions on those things that government is currently making decisions on that directly affect our peoples. That's, I think, a fundamental thing we should be striving for, so decision-making powers. There will, of course, be some decisions that the government is making that don't directly affect us, or that don't only affect us, that have broader implications to the Victorian community. And those are things where I think we as an Assembly should have a function of operating as an influencing voice at that state level, to be able to influence the decisions they are making in a meaningful way. And I think potentially also leveraging that influencing voice to be not just at a state level, but at a national level as well. And we'll need to have those conversations with community about what that could look like, how we want to make that operating, but an influencing voice at both a state and national level. I think that's another really important function. The third function is that if we are going to be responsible for these decisions, for this influencing, we're going to need to have a really powerful function of collaborating with our communities to make sure we understand what they want those decisions to be, what they want that influencing to be about. So collaborating with communities is going to be an absolutely fundamental function of a future version of the Assembly. And we should hopefully be able to put ourselves up as the gold standard of how to consult and engage and collaborate with our communities on this decision making, on this influencing. So that's the third aspect. And the fourth aspect that I think is going to be really important is an aspect around accountability for outcomes. So that those agencies, those organisations, those entities that are currently responsible for delivering on these things, these outcomes for our community, we need to make sure there's a way of holding them accountable, both from a cultural perspective and from a governance perspective. And so I think that's going to be a key role of a future version of the Assembly, that accountability role that it can play. And that could be like things we are seeing with Uruk, where they're bringing in public settings ministers out to grill them and understand what's been going on. I think that could be an ongoing function as the Assembly moving forward, to have that accountability for those who are responsible for achieving these outcomes. So that's going to be a nuanced conversation to have about at what level we need that accountability, to what extent that accountability is needed. But that's, I think, another really critical aspect. So to my mind, at a high level, those are the four functions I think are going to be really important for a future version of the Assembly. That's this idea of decision-making, influencing voice, collaborating with our communities, and the last one being around accountability for outcomes. So those are the four, depending on which way you want to count it, that I think are really important. It'd be great to hear what other people think about that. Keen to have discussions around these things. None of this should be set in stone at this point in time. It's just about being able to start the conversation. But those are the things that I think are going to be, at this point in time, really critical for us to be aspiring to as the Assembly. And just as importantly about what those four things are, I think it's also important to note what they're not. And some of the things I think are deliberately not there are service delivery, subject matter expertise. I don't think we should necessarily be taking over service delivery from government. I definitely don't think we should be taking over service delivery from ACCOs. I think we want to respect those entities that are delivering services, that do have the expertise. We want to play that overarching role to support that work, to make sure it is getting the work that does need to be done, and that there is that accountability across all levels of outcomes for our community. So, like I said, that's just my perspectives at the moment. Always keen to hear other people's thoughts. Let me know what you think. Thanks, everyone. Well, look.